The world runs on oil. It fuels our cars, powers our industries, and heats our homes. For over a century, the nations that control this black gold have held immense power. But what happens when the country with the largest proven oil reserves on the planet finds itself at the center of a geopolitical firestorm? This isn't just a story about oil. It's a story about power, politics, and the fine line between economic pressure and outright conflict. Welcome to the complex world of Venezuela's oil and its entanglement with the United States. Venezuela sits on nearly 300 billion barrels of proven oil reserves. That's more than Saudi Arabia, more than Canada, more than any other nation on Earth. For decades, this immense wealth was the bedrock of its economy. The state-owned oil company, PDVSA, was a global powerhouse, its revenue funding everything from social programs to infrastructure projects. The country was a key supplier to the world, especially to the United States, its neighbor to the north. But then everything changed. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, a political shift swept through Venezuela. The government began nationalizing foreign oil assets and redirecting oil profits. This move created friction with international oil companies and, significantly, with the United States. Washington saw this not just as a business dispute, but as a challenge to its regional influence and economic interests. A narrative began to form, one of a rogue state threatening stability. Was this genuine concern or the first chapter in a battle for control over the world's most valuable resource? The situation escalated. Venezuela's oil production, once mighty, began to plummet. A combination of mismanagement, lack of investment in critical infrastructure, and brain drain crippled PDVSA. The facilities that once pumped millions of barrels a day fell into disrepair. As production dwindled, so did the country's income. The economy spiraled into a severe crisis, leading to hyperinflation, shortages of basic goods, and a humanitarian emergency that saw millions flee the country. It was a perfect storm of internal failure. But was that the whole story? Enter the sanctions. The United States, citing concerns over democracy and human rights, began imposing a series of increasingly stringent economic sanctions against Venezuela. These weren't just targeted at individuals. They hit the heart of the economy, the oil sector. The U.S. banned its companies from dealing with PDVSA, effectively locking Venezuelan crude out of its most important market. It became harder for Venezuela to import diluents needed to process its heavy crude, and even harder to find international partners willing to risk running afoul of American financial. Regulations, officials stated the goal was clear: to pressure the Venezuelan government into holding free and fair elections. The sanctions were framed as a tool of diplomacy, a nonviolent way to encourage democratic change. They argued that the revenue from oil was being used to prop up an authoritarian regime, and cutting off that financial lifeline was the only way to restore democracy. From this perspective, the pressure was a necessary evil, aimed at a greater good for the Venezuelan people, but others saw it differently. Critics, both within Venezuela and around the world, labeled the sanctions as a form of economic warfare. They argued that these measures were a modern-day siege, designed to cripple the country's economy and force a change in leadership that aligned with U.S. interests. Is it a coincidence, they asked, that this intense pressure was being applied to the nation with the most oil? They pointed to a long history of U.S. interventions in Latin America, often linked to economic resources. The narrative of an oil war began to gain traction, a covert conflict fought not with soldiers and tanks, but with financial instruments and trade embargoes. The impact on the ground has been devastating. While the Venezuelan government's own policies are undeniably a major cause of the crisis, the sanctions have made a bad situation infinitely worse. They've complicated the importation of food, medicine, and essential equipment for public services. International aid organizations have reported immense difficulties in navigating the financial blockades. For the average Venezuelan, the geopolitical chess game between Caracas and Washington translates into a daily struggle for survival. The question becomes, who is truly paying the price in this high-stakes standoff? Then the global landscape shifted again. The 2022 conflict in Ukraine sent energy prices soaring and forced Western nations to reconsider their sources of oil. Suddenly, Venezuelan oil, once locked away by sanctions, was back on the table. U.S. officials began quiet talks, exploring the possibility of easing some sanctions in exchange for oil to help stabilize the global market and reduce reliance on other sources. This pragmatic turn raised eyebrows. If the sanctions were purely about democracy, why would they be eased in response to a global energy crunch? It added fuel to the argument that, at its core, this has always been about oil. So, is it an oil war? The answer is not simple. It's a tangled web of genuine democratic concerns, historical grievances, internal mismanagement, and raw geopolitical ambition. The U.S. sees its actions as a legitimate use of economic leverage to promote its values and secure its interests. The Venezuelan government and its allies see a foreign power using its financial might to orchestrate regime change and gain control of its natural resources. It's a battle of narratives, where the truth lies somewhere in the complex interplay between the two. What is undeniable is that Venezuela's oil reserves will continue to be a central factor in its future and in the future of global energy politics. As the world grapples with energy transitions and geopolitical instability, the country with the largest oil prize remains at the center of the board. The story of Venezuela is a powerful, modern-day cautionary tale about the curse of natural resources and the immense power wielded by those who control the flow of money and oil. The game is far from over, and its outcome will have repercussions for us all. Thank you for watching. If this story sparked your curiosity, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the forces that shape our world.